Good afternoon to all our guests today, and good morning if you are in a different time zone, or good very early morning if you are in some other time zones. I'm Rashid Fatah. I'm the founder and director of Our Future Cities. We work on a range of urban development, planning, design, policy, and advocacy issues in relating to creating more sustainable and inclusive cities and more vibrant cities too. And we work in between and collaboratively with companies, government, communities, embassies, and all sorts of weird and crazy people and organizations who are ambitious and progressive in their views about what our cities should become. Today we have a very provocative session, which is based on some of the experiences we had in South Africa around changing streets and public spaces, especially in crises, or in particular the COVID pandemic, and the lack of action that we saw. So we hope that this session will be really an exhibition and a series of provocative, inspirational case studies around tactical urbanism approaches that can reconfigure our public realm and our city streets, not just for the purposes of social distancing and COVID, but for health purposes, for reasons around changing the minds of transport engineers and traffic officials who always predict gloom when anything changes in their terrain or space. And also to talk about some of the existing barriers around technical implementation. So what practically is a barrier when you're trying to activate temporarily or more longer term some of these spaces and streets? What are the opportunities if we do collaborate with different agencies to implement these projects? And then today we'll see a series of global movements, projects, in particular contexts, where we hope to learn some of the lessons from them. And then hopefully we'll have some time for discussion afterwards and some of your questions. But over to our first presentation for today. We're joined by Chiara De Grandi, who is currently in Milan, and she'll share a presentation on the approach that Milan took prior to the pandemic, and in particular, how it continues to be, in my view, my personal view, bold and ambitious and daring in implementing cycle lanes, plaza transformations during, I suppose, a very long period of the sort of lockdown of pandemic in Italy. So Chiara, thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Rashik. I'll share the screen. Hola. So, everything's great? Okay. So my name is Chiara De Grandi. I'm an architect focused on urban regeneration and participatory processes. I'm working for the Agency of Mobility, Environment and Territory in the city of Milan in Italy. It's been 3 years working with them, and it's that's why I want to make just a brief introduction of what Milan was doing just before the pandemic in order to understand what happened after. So I'll start from Milan 2030, which is the territorial management plan that Milan was developing before, and it's a very important vision that wanted to bring Milan towards the future. One of the main topics it was tackling was the theme as public space as a common good, to tackle the difficulties in transforming public space, of course, managing a new sustainable urban mobility, changing neighborhoods, and changing how to approach to the planning in the city. This was very important because that's why we started thinking about business as usual, since structural interventions take millions of euros, many years to be developed, unreversible processes in which you can design a very good solution, such as Piazza Arquinto, which was actually completed last year. And we think it's a great example of good design, but still it's something that's really difficult to develop in a quick and light way. That's why we started dialoguing with Bloomberg Associates and NACTO in 2018, where we tried to manage a different approach, which is tactical urbanism, that actually takes just thousands of euros and not millions. You can have interventions in a few months, sometimes a few weeks, and you can make reversible tests, reversible solutions, and you can monitor what was happening and how to handle the transformation on public space. This is one of the first prototypes the city of Milan made in 2018. This is Piazza d'Ergano. Piazza, it's actually what was its name, but it's actually a car park in this picture. In just a few weeks, it became a place for people. That's something very quick and very easy to be done with not so many ingredients. The tools we used were paint, road markings and asphalt art in order to define this new pedestrian space, but also some curbs and or bike racks to protect this new pedestrian space. Some street furniture in order to start activating it and make people use the new space and try to manage the difference between having a car park and having a space for people. Some greenery, both for aesthetical reasons, but also to face problems such as heat islands we had in many parking lots. This is a great example to understand it. There are also some tools that are activators. Ping pong tables were very successful in many of the open plazas we have in Milan. It's actually very, very common to find them at the moment. I hear some noise. Okay, thank you.
Sorry for that. Thanks.
No problem. Last but not least, I think the main ingredient of this intervention was the community events. So the involvement and inclusion of the communities, local citizens, associations that were active in those spaces, and bringing people in the new spaces was a very successful way in order to transform the vision on the public space. So we started in 2018, and in 1 year we managed to have 15 interventions, 15 new public spaces, which was quite a big number for a process that the administration was not really expert of. So it had so many difficulties and challenges in order to change the way the administration's approach to this kind of interventions. We see, for example, this is one of the main examples we have for 2019. This is a crazy intersection. It's only for cars, like 90% of the public space. It's actually for cars, car parkings, and the community asked for a safe space for kids coming out from the school. This picture is made from the building of the school. And in a few weeks, the administration managed to answer to the community with this new pedestrian space that was actually made and activated with the community. After that, in the end of 2019, the city of Milan opened a public call for citizens, local associations, but also schools and other institutions to receive proposals for new squares. We received 65 proposals in less than 2 months, which was quite a great result. And we started from there the participatory processes in order to develop the design of these new public spaces. In 2020, the pandemic arrived. The lockdown changed completely the approach, and we had to stop for a while. We figured that this was a bad situation, but also a great opportunity, because there was a great reduction in urban traffic. The urgency for interventions in order to tackle the new difficulties was enormous, and there was in general less resistance to the change. Many people asked for change. Everybody was expecting to change something. We were living all the biggest change of all. Milan 2020 strategy faced, it was a document that faced many issues: mobility, services and well-being, support for business, or education and inclusion. In the actions that were advised in the strategy, there was open streets, which is a scaling up of what we were doing before with tactical urbanism. So encouraging active mobility with very fast and quick feasible bike lanes, new streets as public spaces, in order to go towards a 15-minute city and have more proximity and more livable neighborhoods. 35 kilometers of new lanes was the first target. We overcome it quite fast, since we had many new regulamentations in the law that allowed car-protected bike lanes and advisory lanes, which are very quick and light ways to build new bike lanes. We figured that this kind of approach increased the number of the riders, of bike riders, to 8,000 riders per day in the main streets of Milan, which was something that was really overcoming what was happening before with the car traffic. We managed also to have different approaches also in the way of leaving the streets. So we figured to manage pedestrian spaces in a temporary way, a really temporary way, so just closing the beginning and the end of the street, and make play streets, normally in front of schools or in very difficult neighborhoods in which public spaces were lacking. And it was a good experiment with very light furniture, so movable furniture, just to put the kids in a good environment in order to be together. That was something that was very important at the time. The strategy wanted to encourage the use of public outdoor space to host outdoor seating areas for bars and restaurants, cultural and sporting events. We needed to facilitate the widening of the sidewalks in order to obtain more social distancing. So all the strategy of the open plazas was actually scaled up with the Milan 2020 strategy. This diagram, we can see how it became real in such a short time, just with some color and road markings. And that was the beginning also of a new policy that the city of Milan proposed to local bars and restaurants in order to support them after the long closure of the commerces. We received 3,000 requests of occupation, of use of public space from bars and restaurants. 80% was approved, and it was pop-up furniture, but also small tactical interventions made in collaboration with the municipality, but they were made by the commerces that actually applied tactical interventions in front of their commerces. Many informal car parks also on sidewalks, which are not that great, became informal public spaces made by bars and restaurants. And that was a huge change also for car parkings, since 2 car parked meant 15 people dining in front of a restaurant. So it changed very much the streets in the city that were activated, and it was great also for security of people. We had also many shared zones in order to leave more the streets. There were pedestrianized streets that were completely closed to traffic after this process. And of course, we kept on working on the participatory processes started by the public call. So we made other 15 plazas in 2020 in participation with local associations and citizens. This is a great example of last year interventions. This is Piazzale Ferrara, which has a very strong community behind it, and we work with them also for designing the asphalt art, but also the furniture and what was the purpose of this kind of intervention. It meant also safer connections, safer pedestrian connections, but also new bike lanes. So it was every intervention was interconnected with the others. And that meant also to have now a very strong dialogue and very strong connection between the municipality and the community of this neighborhood, which is very great also for the future, because we know where we can handle talking with them and where we can intervene to make a better neighborhood. This is something, I mean, the title we used in the beginning was Towards a New Normal, since everybody was really trying to get back to normal. We think the normal that was before was not that great. And that's why we wanted to imagine something different, and wanted to imagine a stronger community that takes place in public space. And that's pretty much all. I am anyway available for any kind of question and discussion.
Thank you so much, Chiara. That was incredible. I have a very strange question to ask. We are trying to implement pedestrian crossing using paint. And I have to ask you, the transport officials or the transport team, is there a particular paint that you use that is okay to use on a road? Because we've been asked questions like, how long will the paint last? Will you maintain the paint? Will it distract people from driving into people? So did you have any of those barriers on your side?
Well, sorry. Can I hear very much? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, Chiara. Can I just, Teddy, can you please keep your sound off, because there's a very sharp sound if you're not muted. Thanks so much. Over to you, Chiara.
Thank you. No, really, actually, the tactical interventions don't need to be eternal. It's a temporary solution, and you have to manage to look forward to a final intervention, a structural intervention that make the square, the plaza realize. So I think, yeah, you can use paint that lasts longer, but still, I think that's not the point. You need just to make people think of that space in a different way, and paint is just a tool at the moment. You don't need to have it eternal. something I think it's very important to understand. It's tactical urbanism. It's a tool to change the city and to make people understand what can be done with all that space that now is used just by cars, you know.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And I will use that in the next email requesting that maintenance is covered for 12 months and any possible liability.
That's a theme everywhere. I think maintenance of these things is anyway, it's quite difficult for an administration, but I think it can be done. So you just have to face these different themes. Thank you.
Thanks, Chiara. Moving over to Barcelona, a city and country which I hold very dear to my heart. We have fortunate to have Caroline Daher, who's a public health specialist with over 15 years experience. And I was very excited to include Caroline because when we're building a case for tactical improvement or changes to streets and spaces, we sometimes lack evidence that it's not merely about making the urbanists happy and putting color and paint into spaces. And Caroline looks at these changes as being essential to our health and to our livelihoods in cities. So thank you, Caroline, and over to you.
Thank you so much. You can hear me okay?
Perfectly, thanks.
Yes, so I'm a public health specialist, and I work to bring our scientific evidence into policy and practice here at the Barcelona Institute for Global Health. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the relationship between health and public space. And I think it's important to start with what we understand by health, right? And so I just wanted to go over the definition of what health is. And so according to the WHO, health is the complete state of well-being, and mentally, socially, and physically, and not merely the absence of disease. So if we understand health to be this, it opens up the opportunity for us to see the holistic nature of what we mean by health and what determines our health. And when I say determinants of health, it's what are the factors that determine, the quality of life that we're going to have, the well-being. And as it turns out, a lot of those factors are exterior to ourselves as individuals, right? And so the WHO estimates that about 25% of our health is actually determined by the physical environment in which we live. And so taking in combination this very holistic definition of health and what causes our health, we can see how public space and urban models become a very, very powerful opportunity for public health intervention. We also know that the world is rapidly urbanizing, and people who live in cities, many of them live in very precarious conditions. And this, of course, is going to be a public health problem. We also know that cities offer a lot of opportunities, but they exacerbate health inequalities. And so we need, at all levels, targeted policies and actions that can help us address inequalities to make sure that all neighborhoods can be benefiting from good health and be protected against health threats in an equal way. So one of the main issues that we deal with in cities that affects our health, but that is definitely in the planning sector, is the fact that in Barcelona, for instance, this is the case, but we've heard from Milan that in some cases it's over 90%. A huge amount of our public space is dedicated to road infrastructure, leaving very little space for people and their needs. And I think we can understand by this picture that we see in the background that this model of public space generates a lot of things that are negative for health, like air pollution, heat, and noise, right? Sedentary lifestyles. We don't move enough. There are no trees here. There are no places for children to play. So this model generates, and it doesn't allow us to have things that we know are beneficial to our health, like green and blue spaces and physical activity, social connection and play. So the model that we have right now of so much of our public space being dedicated to individualized motorized traffic is a real problem for us, because it generates a lot of externalities or negative health consequences. So the main point that I want to make today is that the drivers of health in cities come from outside the health sector, right? So we understand that our health is determined by all these factors that are outside of us. And yes, our lifestyle choices and our genetics do play a role, but we need environments that foster us to take healthy lifestyle decisions and to be able to do that easily, right? It's hard to say that we need people to eat healthier and get more physical activity if they don't have access to good food, or they don't have access to safe places to do physical activity in their environments. So for me, the point, especially that we see this with COVID, is the health system cannot answer and cannot be the only response to the health challenges that we face now and will face in the future. We need urban environments that protect and promote health in their very form and structure. So at AS Global, we focus on these 5 exposures that I'm going to go in a little bit more detail. I understand that there are other aspects like housing, access to nutrition, the waste management and water that are very, very important to health, but I'm going to focus on these today. So this is just a summary that's available on our website online in interactive form that shows you how these different environmental exposures related to our urban form can impact our health. And we can really see here that there is no part of our body, no system, from our reproductive system to our cognitive development to the way that we age or develop as children, our pregnancies and everything, that are unaffected by these types of exposures. And then again, the type of urban environments that we're living in. So this is our conceptual framework of how we try and understand that the pathway between the urban design decision-making and then the disease and death that will be related to the way that our cities are planned and maintained. So in order to achieve healthier cities, we need a series of different paradigm shifts. And one of them is in the fact that we need to move more. The WHO recently changed its guidelines about physical activity. And what they're saying is that every move counts. We need people to move more, period. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the gym or doing high intensity activity, though that is good for us, but we need people in their everyday lives and their everyday activities to be moving more. And so we can see how designing a city that facilitates active mobility could be a great way, a cost-effective way, and an easy way for people to incorporate more movement on a day-to-day. Children walking or biking to school, older people, you know, being able to move around freely and safely in the city for daily walks. General population going to and from work or doing some of your errands, walking or cycling, or in a combination with public transport. All of these will accrue very large health benefits because obesity and sedentary lifestyles are one of our most costly and most important public health challenges worldwide right now. So we need cities that are really designed for people and that prioritize pedestrians. And again, these will have a number of health benefits. We also need natural spaces. There's a very compelling body of evidence that shows that natural and green spaces are very good for our health in many different ways and at all phases of our lifetime. For children, for cognitive development, for older people, for aging, for stress reduction, for restoration against stress. And so, you know, when we think about these tactical urbanism and interventions, these are well and good, but we need to make sure that green space and natural-based solutions are very much a part of these solutions that we're going to give. And these are just some examples of the health benefits that exposure to natural spaces. So making sure that people have access to green spaces very close to the places where they spend time, school and home, and making sure that these green spaces are connected so that people can basically have green routes is very, very important for promoting health. And it's a cost-effective way. Heat is the natural disaster that kills most people worldwide every year, but it is very underestimated in terms of its true impact. And heat is going to be an increasing problem. I think we are all more and more aware the effects of climate change are undeniable at this point, and the health impacts are also very important. Cities, because they prioritize streets and road infrastructure and buildings, they absorb heat and then they release it, creating what is called the heat island effect. And this again has broad public health implications, from the way that children are able to learn at school, to heat stress and hospitalizations, to workplace accidents. So we really need to think about what are the ways that we can reduce heat. And again, green and intervening in public spaces to have less asphalt surfaces is an excellent way to do that. Social connections are also critically important. Loneliness in some ways is our next pandemic. People who live in cities often feel lonely, and there are other stressful and mental health related issues that can be exacerbated by urban life. So again, how can our public spaces be designed to foster social connections and interactions that we know are so critical for our health? This is an example from Barcelona. Looking at this map, which is the center of Barcelona, what's called the Eixample, we can understand, you know, we can begin to apply the things that I've just said and think, you know, how is public space managed here? What are really the priorities for public space? And we see that, you know, in theory, there should be some green space, but a lot of it is really dominated by this road traffic. And so what these exposures look like, some of these ones that I was saying are very negative to our health, you can see on the map here that they are all pretty much concentrated around the roadways. So if you live on a busy street, you will have more exposure to these negative environmental aspects. And what does this translate to into death? About 3,000 premature deaths every year are due to suboptimal urban planning in Barcelona. And these could be reduced if we were able to meet the WHO recommendations for these different exposures. And I didn't include the slide on illness here, but the illness is also very big. And interestingly enough, the biggest impact for illness is actually noise. Noise pollution is something that is extremely underestimated in cities, but is very much a health problem. So this is my second main point, that designers, architects, and urban transport planners have a critical opportunity to protect and promote health. Transport planners, designers, architects are agents of public health, and we really need people to see themselves in that way to understand the critical role that they play. Again, the health challenges that we are facing today and are faced in the future are not something that the health system alone can solve, nor should they be solving. We need to be preventing illness, and we need to be promoting and creating health through our very neighborhoods and communities. So how can we do this? Well, as I was saying, we very much need this multi-sectoral approach. We need to break down the silos and the way that governments work. Public health planners, public health specialists, planners, people who work on forestry and understand plants and whatnot, all need to be working together. We need health to be transversally included in all of these other sectors so that we can properly understand the health risks and the health benefits of taking these actions. And there are tools to do this, such as health impact assessments. We need to engage with communities to make change. This is very important. Communities often know what they need. They can benefit from empowerment, and they can be the protagonists in creating health within their neighborhoods, and then monitoring and evaluating what are the biggest risks and what are the benefits they are having over time, because sometimes we plan and we implement things that don't work. Right? And so it's very important for us to understand what works and doesn't work, and to involve the communities in helping keep track of that and give us feedback. We need a radical paradigm shift in the way we think about mobility. Mobility has to stop being about getting from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible, because that's not the way so many people move. Children don't think about efficiency when they move. Older people not as well. Yes, when we're going to work, we want to get there efficiently, but there are many other ways that mobility can play a role in our life and promote health. It can be social interaction, exchange, contact with nature. And so we need to radically change this paradigm, and where people and pedestrians are really at the heart and given the prioritization within public space. We have very large health benefits that we can accrue if we are able to change this model. This is an example from Barcelona, how they've taken the city grid and tried to change it with the super block model and liberate public space that was originally dedicated to cars to these other activities. And we did a health impact assessment this to try and help them understand what would be the health benefits of an urban model. And it looks something like this. About 700 premature deaths every year in the city could be prevented if we change the way that our city is designed. That is not an unimportant number. That, if you take that over a decade, that's almost 7,000 deaths prevented. And that's not even going into illness, absenteeism, missed work, and other things like that. So really, if we can begin to include the health argument and the health costs and benefits, because health costs are very expensive in terms of economically and socially, we will see, I think, that there is a compelling evidence for making health a transversal element. There are some other good guidelines out there. Shirley Hilberry-Moore, such about designing streets for kids. There are a number of tools as a result of the pandemic and things that have come out, guidelines and tools. And I think that most of these are available for free on the web, and cities can harness these and begin to share them and use them. Tactical urbanism. We've created this document. Again, this is freely available online, that tries to articulate how during the pandemic and then post tactical urbanism can be used to promote health and the different benefits that it can have. And again, we see, physical activity, mental health, traffic accidents, which are huge in Africa, can all be addressed through some tactical urbanism. And COVID-19 gave us a very compelling argument to do that. This is just some examples in Barcelona and Paris that definitely the pandemic has been a motivation for many cities to try to include more tactical urbanism and change their urban model for more active transport, for instance, and liberate social spaces for social interaction in public space. This is a tool that we've developed that will be launched very soon and will be available on the web that tries to help architects and city planners integrate health into their space planning. So it's based on scientific literature about health. And what we did is we used a consensual process working with planners and architects and designers to look at different types of public spaces and what are the different that are elements involved, and see if we could design a tool that could help through answering a series of questions about public spaces, help visualize in a very visual way, help architects and planners understand the different health exposures and different determinants of health and how these related in specifically their plan. And then if you are to change the characteristics of that public space, how that can benefit or maybe needs to be addressed to improve health. So this will be launched very soon, but this is just to give you an example. We use these are the different categories that we looked at and the different determinants within each of them. And then it will give you a graph like this with some transversal elements such as green space. And so again, we will be able to evaluate when you are planning your public spaces, how well they might quote unquote perform in terms of health benefits. Here are some other examples. A lot of these again are related to transport, but not exclusively. These are all available for cities to use to understand the health implications of their planning. This is another tool that we developed, a checklist that again reviewed all the scientific literature and tried to identify what are the elements and the principles that are important. And this also is available online to help people plan. And then, different ways that we can involve communities to help understand and take on and get motivated to make change. So we designed a comic. Again, this is available online in 3 different languages, and it tried to illustrate the different environmental challenges that we're making in our city and articulate it in a new way. So this is a perfect, kind of tool that you can use in schools or with different audiences for us to begin talking about some of these issues and in a very visual way, understand how all these pieces connect together. For those of you who like more academic books, we have a 700-page book that can help you understand and the research behind all the things that I presented today. And just wanted to conclude with some of these basic principles about what we think are important for public spaces and the way that they need to be designed to really promote not only health but prosperous urban futures. And I like this quote a lot by Placemaking group that they've done some really great work about transformation of public spaces, but basically they say that if you plan cities for cars and traffic, you get cars and traffic. And if you plan for people and places, you'll get people in places. And when we focus on people and places, I think we'll all enjoy more well-being and have a better quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And thank you for reminding us that there are also ways to measure the benefits. And there are toolkits that are already available out there, which we could apply and use in our advocacy as well. I'm going to fly from Barcelona to Kampala. Thank you so much, Teddy, for joining us today. Teddy Awori is the CEO of Critical Mass Kampala, and we were so excited to see your Instagram account. We thought even if it's just 5 minutes, we need to chat to you and get your perspective as well, because we see these cycle lanes popping up in Paris and Milan, and some of us in South Africa, and I assume in parts of the rest of Africa are sort of going, wait, hold it. So we're just trying to get people onto bicycles. So thanks so much, Teddy. How and why did Critical Mass Kampala start, and how has the movement grown in the last, I think it's since 2018, how has the movement grown?
Critical Mass Kampala it's okay. Let me just share my screen with you so I can talk while sharing. Are you guys seeing it? Okay. Are you seeing my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Are you seeing it now?
Still not?
Still not. Okay. So let me just do this. Sure. Have you seen it?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Okay, so I'm called Teddy Patricia Awori, and I'm the CEO of Critical Mass Kampala. It's a movement of youth activists whose aim is to make the capital streets safer for walking, cycling, and also enabling 1,000 more Ugandans to choose cleaner and healthier ways of transportation. So we began in 2018 with a group of people that are also passionate about cycling and about creating awareness for cycling on the roads of Kampala. Our roads are really, really crowded with cars, and in a bid to reduce the carbon footprint, we as a team or as a group, as an organization, we want to reduce the emissions, the carbon emissions in the air by advocating for other ways of transportation like cycling, walking, and probably electric automobiles. So one of our purposes is to advocate for the rights of cyclists on roads. If you by any chance sometime get to visit Uganda, that is Kampala, you will notice that the roads are really, they're not designed in such a way that we get to include cyclists, especially those that don't have the means to use cars. So we as a team, we want to create awareness and also advocate for infrastructure that will be able to include them. Are we okay? Are we getting there? Is everyone in? Oh, I'm talking by myself.
We can see clearly, Teddy. Thanks.
Okay. So I need a bit of interaction so I can know that I'm not talking by myself. So how we intend to achieve our purpose is by designing and advocating for infrastructure that includes cyclists on the road. Just like you see this slide, the roads are really not as clear because it's mostly for the cars, and the cyclists have to figure out how to get in there. So we also organize cycling events around internationally recognized days to create awareness on healthier and quicker option for transportation around the city and later on in the rest of the country. We also organize webinars where we get to discuss how to improve the carbon footprint in the country. We believe that together as a team or together as people, we can make our cities cleaner, healthier, and easier for everyone to be able to use. We've been having, especially after the COVID pandemic, we were in a total lockdown, and the only means of transportation was cycling. So you would find most people on the road when they're either jogging, walking, or cycling. So as a team, we were like, why don't we do the advocacy? Why don't we do the advocacy for cycling and improve people's well-being? Because aside just being a means of transportation, we also know that cycling helps with our mental health, helps with generally our health, and also keeps us fit and in line. So as Critical Mass Kampala, we are all about cycling, and we're all about improving cyclist life on the road. So without further ado, that's basically us. So we want to look at
I think we've lost Teddy for a few moments, but on that note, we'll continue. Thank you so much, Teddy. We lost you for 5 seconds, but we will continue with our presentations.
Yeah.
So, Tony, we're very lucky to have you from the Street Plans Collaborative, and you lead the Miami office. Hopefully it's not too cold in Miami today. Tony is also a co-author of, I'm sure you all know, the book and series, Tactical Urbanism, Short-Term Action, Long-Term Change, which has been around for a couple of years already. So thank you so much for joining us, Tony. As I mentioned to you earlier, we were so inspired by the work of and the images that were shared on by your business partner, Mike Lydon, on Facebook, and the work you've been doing in particular across the US, and some of the incredible visuals of working with communities to really repurpose streets and public spaces. So Tony, when you're ready, you can just check that your screen share is working. I think we've lost Tony for a little bit as well. We'll just move to Cape Town, and Ben and Alfredo are here from Urban Think Tank, and they've been working on a very interesting project. I suppose it's the next phase of the Empower Shack project in Kailicha, which we've been following, I believe, Alfredo and Ben, since the year 2015, when some of our team and interns painted the prototype, and then were involved in some of the first phase as well. What's it been like implementing another phase during COVID? And tell us about, I've seen some of the images of the playground being manufactured. Tell us a bit about that and what it's been like over the last 2 years.
Would you like to see some presentation?
Yeah, I would like to see any images that you have, or
sure. But you want me to do the 15-minute presentation now?
Yeah, go for it now.
Okay, good. I'll just share, and then maybe after we can say a few words. I'll try to go fast. Yeah. Okay, let me share screen. Very good. Here we go. Sorry. All good? Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
So
you'll have to pick your slides carefully.
The point is, well, you can just let me know. It's very informal. So basically, how do we build an equitable society? That's the real challenge. I think South Africa has taught me a great deal. That's why I'm there, that I stay interested. And we've come up with this idea of the gold agenda. Basically, the gold agenda, as you guys might know, the gold agenda is basically, you have the green agenda, which is long-term, which is all about, high tech, maybe solar panels, etc., energy. That's the green agenda, carbon credits. Then you have the brown agenda, which is all about the poor. That's short-term, always palliative, bathrooms, toilets, things, sewage, etc., etc. So can the architect do anything in that story? Well, we think we've come up with a few ideas of how to build a kind of sustainable neighborhood. Urban Think Tank obviously is the company, and this is the area and the place where we're doing it. It's Kailicha. Of course, some of you know it. It's just outside of Cape Town. It's a township. There was a successful program to make RDPs, but in all the available space that was left over, shacks have popped up. So we have done this new housing block, and there's more to be completed this year as we go. But the green agenda, I told you, brown agenda, but we can solve both of those ideas together. That's what I'm going to try and say, because obviously we now, post-COVID, we know better than anything that human beings are at the center of sustainable development, right? The term sustainability and sustainable development sounds like an oxymoron, right? How do you do development and make it sustainable? And it's caused a lot of confusion, and it's, describes two very different concepts. The debate on sustainability has given rise to tensions between, weak sustainability and others demanding strong sustainability between the developed and the developing worlds. So again, a challenge for us to look at when we were trying to turn, what we call blocking out, which is to with the community to transform the shacks into something else. So the recognition of this interdependence of an ecosystem health, obviously human well-being at the same time, is this at the heart of this transformation and thinking about neighborhoods. The development debate has obviously been influenced by an increasing awareness of human rights. That's why we're in South Africa, because it's the rights of the most vulnerable groups, the women, the children, the elderly, the disabled, the indigenous people. All of those are in Caliche, are in the site of BT South. And we need to think of it because we can't have islands of spatial affluence and geographical and areas of geographical misery. That's impossible. We have Cape Town and the beaches are used for Hollywood movies and everything and the coastline. But yet at the same time, you have huge, Caliche must be 700,000 people strong living in shacks. So the Golden Agenda will support sustainable urban economy because by creating a double-story house, where a shack once stood, you create work and provide wealth. You actually turn it into land titles. It'll create a sustainable urban society with social coherence and social solidarity because the whole community came together to build the houses. And you'll create a sustainable urban shelter providing decent housing, which is the first line of attack and defense for COVID and health issues, right? So, and a stable ecosystem, you'll see it. So this is what we're talking about for those of you who haven't seen it. The walls are painted up with graffiti by the community, and we've helped them and moderated those processes. All the houses has been built in unison with the community. Each house and townhouse, row house has a different configuration of apartments inside. Here you can see another view. They still remain in the ambiguity between a formal house and an informal settlement. So we've created this new typology, which is kind of just-in-time housing, right? This is what I call, let's say, a sustainable human settlement. Why? Because it's not perfect. We're not striving for perfection. We have to learn to live in imperfection in this world, but we can provide physical, spatial, technological, socioeconomic, and institutional framework to change the housing policy of South Africa if we start to accept that the shacks will remain and not give them small palliative infrastructures, right? But we have to think of a dimension of time. We have to do this over stages. Those of you who know the Empower Shack, and Rashik will talk about it, it began as an activist move to just create one little shack in 3 days. And it has evolved and evolved. And we went from wood houses with wood flooring and to concrete flooring and concrete walls at different ones for fire. Here you see MK's house. So those of you who believe that the government can house everyone, you're wrong. It can't be done. The people in the shacks and the informal settlements, they know better how to house themselves. They know what they need. Here's the perfect example: a store on the ground floor and a living above. So our research has gone long and extensive into the different housing typologies and technological developments. And what is a constant is a degree of flexibility. We need laws in place that are flexible. Maybe bathrooms aren't finished, maybe kitchens aren't finished the way we know them, or maybe, you know, the house can be retrofit or finished inside. Maybe it can grow. That is sustainability for me. This is the team, UTT and Ikailami, an NGO, Andy Bolnick, some of you might know, and the team and Scott back there from UTT. We put together this program together. And as I stand here and tell you this story, it's because I believe sustainable settlements should be both rich and poor, social and economic interactions with each other. And that's the point. The richer RDP houses, or even the well-located parts of Caliche, have to be in dialogue with the poor. And we need to make a kind of hybrid and connect things. How do we do that? We create something called a land release credit. We make a cooperative and everyone negotiates space together. Of course, and you can see the diagram of this kind of interchange of square meters. And very quickly, I'll take you through the process of building the first activist house, and which was Pumezo's house here on the map. And then we realized if we go vertical and make more compact row houses, we can have available land and we can build replacement housing or rental units and then still get public space. So public space is at the key of this whole idea. You have a dense neighborhood. Here's the mapping of the houses themselves. When we first arrived, we went and did all kinds of workshops to find out, information about income and etc. and how many people living in every shack. And then we played a game. We figured out, well, if you could, what would you do? Who wants to live next to who, etc. And that ended up in this kind of set of pieces that could be combined to create the townhouse or the row house that they most wanted. And here, testing the sizes of those houses, and then the city imposed firewalls on us. And here's the finished product. And as you see, the public space, the playground, which Rashid talked about, is about to be finished this year. And you see it here in the middle of the drawing, and it's a very interesting design with Jeffrey James, an artist, where the pieces of the puzzle of the community space can all be configured in different ways. But how did we do it? And where's the financing? And what's the legal system? Well, we need to move to a rent-to-own model. We need to make these houses first rental and then ownership so that they can be paid over 10 to 15 years with 1/3 of the average income. So we need a strong community association. We need also a culture of paying and coming together as a community. If not, the social aspects of sustainable development won't be there. So we saw this as we flew over in a helicopter. We said, this is a solar field. This is how we're going to pay for the houses. So on every roof now, and you already see infrastructures being done. They have antennas, they have all kinds of batteries and things. We could make the whole neighborhood one collective power station. We could share internet. We could share so many things. So we call that the solar model. So here you had Pumezo Shack, of course, and then that gets upgraded, and then we get a solar shack, and then the next house next to it. And eventually we've got all the roofs and we can extend this. Now, what do? We rent the roof from the individuals. This is called solar hacking, or shacking, if you want. And with that solar power, we illuminate the public spaces and the public ways on the first account, and then give power to the units themselves. Here you see the image. We are in the process of finishing that as we talk today. So the playground, the houses, and the communal space that is made with these 6 pieces that can be configured in every different way. So this is a very ingenious design with Jeffrey James again, a little community space. And here you see the pieces being fabricated in South Africa and moving to site very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. I'm interested in the sort of manufacturing process in terms of how you, in the last year or so, have been able to keep the project going along, and have there been any challenges with that in sort of implementing and manufacturing?
Huge challenges. I think we hit a good moment post-COVID, or in the middle of COVID. I'll let Ben talk more, as he's the on-site project architect for South Africa of UTT. And basically, we had availability in the concrete production factory to make these pieces. So COVID, in that sense, let us brainstorm. The pressure was taken off of us a little bit to work and create the funds, get the funds and the program to have this in place. Ben, say a few words about manufacturing. You were there.
So it really is. It's a fascinating process, and this whole playground design really, I feel like, hits the nail on the head with the, it's become quite a complex balance of or equilibrium. I mean, Chiara spoke about it briefly, what's temporary and what's permanent, and these very temporary spaces. And now with this playground, we're trying to create something that's both temporary and permanent. You know, it's not necessarily something that we need to activate because the people are there. There's an abundance of people. We just need to provide a space for them. And that's how we almost, you know, these concrete sculptures, these concrete pieces provide something that's permanent, but that can be, that's quite malleable at the same time, you know, to create a space for the people, with the people, which I think is quite fascinating. And it's been a very hands-on process throughout the manufacturing, of these pieces and the creation of this space. Even you know, since post-COVID, now being able to get back on site and meet with the community, and everything is tested on site. You know, a few days ago we installed some light fittings to produce that public lighting, and everything's tested on site, seen on site, and it's not just, you know, myself or Alfredo who authorized it. Every step of the process is done with the community, because, you know, they almost the biggest shareholder in this project. They need to come and see that this is working for them.
So basically,
Thanks.
yeah, I just wanted to say, it's getting rid of the master builder architect, the one who sits in his office, signs things, draws things. It's about an iterative process with people and by the people. And if not, it ain't gonna get done.
Ben and Alfredo, I'll be calling on you to implement something similar. Once you've got the costs and you've got it down to precision, let's try and replicate
Wonderful.
your playground elsewhere, and let's see how that goes. Thank you so much, and it's a great local example of I think under very strange times still pushing forward with the project, and somehow especially with Ben being on site so frequently, really engaging frequently, I suppose, you know, daily and both weekly. And coming out of something beautiful, in my view, in terms of a structural form that people use. And I hope you do some time lapses of how people use the space and monitor it, and let us know what works and what doesn't work, because I suppose that's the whole point. Nothing needs to be final. Go for it, Ben. that's the whole beauty of it, and how this project is continually evolving and still continues to evolve. You know, these and that's the beauty of it. That's going to be an amazing study in a couple of years to see how where it still needs to go. Great. Thanks so much. We'll move over to Tony Garcia, the co-founder of Street Plans Collaborative, and he leads the firm's Miami office. And hopefully we'll all know the Tactical Urbanism book, which again co-published with Mike Lydon, Short-Term Action for Long-Term Change. Tony, thank you for joining us and hopefully inspiring us from your context, your projects and the visuals and the work across the world and across social media is well known, and we often use it in some of our own presentations, with credits, of course, to advocate. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you and the Street Plans team. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, and it's been such a pleasure to see all the work being done by my colleagues here. Of course, I'm a big fan of the Milan work and have been following it closely. I'm just so delighted to be able to share the work that we're doing. I'm not going to share so many of the projects. I really want to take a step back and think about the philosophy of why we do this. I think we've already covered it. A lot of discussion has already been had about this. But I just want to go back and think about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we go, where we go from here. I think actually I usually start the presentations, but I like to close it now. I think this makes a lot of sense because I have some advice for the tactical urbanists in the audience and for those who are viewing. Just to introduce myself, my name's Tony Garcia. I'm a principal of Street Plans, co-founder. We do transportation planning, really is the core of our business. And Mike and I started Street Plans coming off of working as architects and urban planners on buildings in Miami during the housing bubble of the mid-2000s. And we were friends and colleagues, professional colleagues, and we were bloggers by night. So by day we were architects, professionals, and by night we were blogging and writing letters and advocating for better transportation in Miami. At that time, Mike lived in Miami. And that's really where our practice started, because we realized that's where our passion is, that's where what our interest is, and we've created a business out of it, which is a really, I think, a beautiful thing looking back on it now, these 15 years later. And so we started just doing master plans and reports because that's what clients pay for, that's what cities pay for, but really got disillusioned early on because a lot of that great work just sits on a shelf. And so we started doing tactical urbanism and documenting what was already happening around the world. And I think tactical urbanism is a nice name, but it's really about what the approach is. And this is not something new. People have been doing this for decades. So don't worry about the term, but we started doing it early on in our career, and then it became a thing where clients were paying for it. So at this point, we do everything from the master plans at a very high level, at a 30,000 foot level, all the way to the technical drawings that are needed to actually implement the projects, and then all of the on the ground work. So these photos are all images of projects that we've done ourselves. That is, I have been there painting and sticking down delineators and rolling out grass and putting out chairs. And I mean, it's really the most satisfying and fun part of the work that we do. And it's become a much larger part of the work. For those of you who are not familiar with this, we've documented this really all over the world, and tried to put out as many resources as we can for people to really be able to learn from each other. Most recently, we worked on a guide with the federal transportation officials on how to do transit, which I think is really the next thing that we all need to, at least in the United States, wrap our minds around. Reallocating space from cars for transit, that's the big need, and specifically for bus transport. And then also the asphalt art guide. I see some questions in the chat about accessibility when it comes to asphalt art, and also there was a question earlier about the paint. Happy to answer questions about that. But just to step back, where does this idea come from? And a lot of this is focused on the United States, but I find when I talk to folks and colleagues from around the world, we all have very similar experiences, even though we think that we don't. The transportation engineers are usually the ones that should slow down or stop the process. Our public processes are broken for different reasons in different cultures. So in the United States, the legacy of the highway building bonanza that happened in the 1950s is what we're dealing with today still, because that decade-long experiment in destroying neighborhoods and building highways through urban centers led to the creation of a very burdensome public process that simply doesn't address the root cause of what happened with those highways. So, and I'm sure many of you have this experience as well. Our city government focuses on large projects, what we call the silver bullet projects. They're the projects that are going to solve all of our problems. It's the stadium. It's the streetcar that doesn't really move people. It's any number of things. That process is slow, expensive. It's not iterative, and it's not really intended to get anybody involved in the process. So it's so one-dimensional and one way. As a consultant, I'm there to tell you what we're going to do and to check a box to say that we had a public meeting. And we shouldn't be surprised that doesn't work, that people are distrustful of a government when government just does what it wants to do and doesn't actually listen to people. And I've been giving this presentation for 15 years now, and the staying power of this slide is almost scary. This is one of the first things that we zeroed in on in the mid-2000s, that there was a distrust in government, and it hasn't even gotten better, it's gotten worse. And I think, our phenomenon here, and I think there is a global phenomenon with regard to this as well. The Donald Trumps of the world and the Bernie Sanders, they're kind of talking about the same thing in a way. It's about people's distrust of government, and they're manifested in completely different ways. And one is clearly better than the other. But I think that the root cause of that is, as it relates to the work that we do in urban planning and transport planning, it's just a disconnect between the government and the decision makers and the people who they're trying to serve. At the same time, we are all trained. We have been trained over the past 20 years. I'm technically a Gen Xer, but I was born on the cusp of generations, and I remember the analog world, but I'm more in the digital world. So I remember the evolution of our technologies and our softwares, and I think all of us have this experience. We download a new version of the iPhone software, right? And there are things that are fixed, and then there are things that are broken. And we expect it, and I think we're patient with it. I just read an article yesterday about Apple realizing that it made a mistake with all the changes that they made with the keyboard and the ports and going back to the previous version. That's tactical urbanism. It just has to do with computers. It's a tactical product design. I mean, it is product design. That's how we do products. It's how we do our phones. It's how cars are designed, everything. But we don't use that for our cities. That doesn't make sense. So I feel like culturally, we are ready for tactical urbanism. We have been. And finally, I think there's a more fundamental issue. As urban planners and architects, we love to impose our order on the world. And sometimes that's a good thing. But other times we're so tone deaf and completely ignorant to what people actually want that I love to say, and I feel this in my core, we need to approach these projects and the public with humility. We do not know everything, and I have no shame or embarrassment in saying, and I say this to our clients as well, we make up 90% of this stuff in response to what is on the ground. And so let's continue to be humble and listen, really truly listen, and allow that co-creation process to occur. Now, all of that, I think, is the setup for what this is. What is tactical urbanism? And it's really about short-term action for long-term change. And there are steps to this, right? So you can start with a one-day thing or a 1 month long test, leading all the way up into long-term capital projects. Usually, 99% of the projects that we do now are jumping into long-term capital. That means there's no real opportunity to test. There's no opportunity to involve the public in a meaningful way. And it's a heavy investment in money and political time, political effort. And so that's where we come in and we try to have cities really unwind the project delivery process so that there is an opportunity for iteration in the manner that's been described by my colleagues. Now, that was the situation in 2019 and for the past 15 years. So we've been sort of preaching this to anybody that'll listen for that amount of time, and then COVID happened. And it shouldn't be any surprise. It's not a surprise to anyone that this is a typical scene that we saw. It's almost like tactical urbanism, this was the moment for tactical urbanism because of the complete disruption in society on a global scale. And we really saw, at least in the United States, and I'm sure in other places as well, two societies forming and emerging or revealing themselves because they were always there. There are the people who had the ability to go out during their lunch hour and rollerblade down the street and enjoy open streets and enjoy the lack of traffic. And then there were our essential workers who were janitors and nurses and construction workers who all stayed working, actually, who are using transit. And so this is the contrast of the situation that we're in right now, I think, still. But we saw a lot of really great things happen in our streets. And we saw really still terrible things happening with our transit. And part of what I want to talk about today and the advice I want to give is we need to focus and put this in perspective. Who are we really helping, and are the benefits of our tactical projects being enjoyed by everyone? And I would say no, they're not. I'm the first to critique our work. So when it came to tactical application for COVID, you saw that immediate response, the emergency response in the first month with just cones and the most temporary materials. And now we're really moving into how do we harden and improve those projects over time. Part of the learning that we did during this past year was really working with NACTO and Bloomberg to try to help cities, and this is more focused on American cities, but I think it is still applicable worldwide, to help address more often than not the engineering department and their concerns with some of these issues, and put down in a document how to make some of this happen. And I think we've had great success with this document and having it applied around the United States. And what we've learned and discovered is, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody on this call, is that the social value of our streets actually has an economic value that was hidden because it was being taken up by cars that didn't provide any sort of return on investment. And I don't like to connect our public spaces to an economic metric, but it's what can convince our political leaders in the United States, at least, that these projects are good. And oftentimes, if you're looking for a way to address the engineering department's concerns, you really just have to start at the top and get that political leadership to support you, and then they direct staff to get things done. So it's not only about working with your engineering departments, but about leveraging your political culture and your political champions. So in New York, at least, they've done this analysis that the increase in revenue because of the on-street dining has been, a triple-digit increase. And I'm not saying that this is the end-all be-all. I think that there are a lot of really critical and serious issues with regard to equitable access to public space. Who is benefiting from these public spaces? Are they accessible to folks in wheelchairs and others that have accessibility issues? But I think there's an underlying issue here that we've been misusing our public spaces, our streets, as car parking. And at least this experiment in tactical urbanism during COVID has allowed us to uncover that. So here's just some advice, and I'd love to have this conversation with you all. So I'm going to wrap up. My first advice is, now's the time to move from the crisis response to the new normal. We decide what the new normal is. It's not an accident. It's not something that we just accidentally happen to do. We have the ability to direct that work and to really decide about what is the future that we want. And so I love showing this. This is in Miami Beach. It's Miami Beach's Main Street, Washington Avenue. And they took most of the street for bicycling and outdoor dining. And they kept on-street parking, and they kept one travel lane. So now the discussion is, and it's been hugely successful. You saw triple-digit increases in the number of people bicycling. Not a surprise to anybody who's going to be on this, watching this video or on this call. But it was a surprise to City of Miami Beach city leaders. That being said, they're struggling so much right now with what to do with this street, because they had never pictured it in this way. They had pictured it as a 2-lane road with, with transit and other activities, but the volume of traffic doesn't warrant 4 lanes of traffic, of car lanes. So they're really struggling with how to take this and adapt it. And I think that's a big lesson for folks. Don't move back, move forward. You don't need to move back. This whole experiment has shown that we have totally misallocated space for cars and not for people. So let's move forward from here. My second point, which is really the first point, is who are these projects for? And we need to do a much better job, a complete 180 about how we address accessibility and equity. Who is using the work, who's using these projects? You look at this image. This is just a random image that I got off of Google. It was not hard to find the first image of a street outdoor dining that was completely inaccessible to folks who had issues walking around. First of all, the sidewalk here is completely cluttered with cafe seating. You can see that there's a red line that's supposed to denote the public space from the outdoor dining, and it's not even respected. And then also these types of tables, the high top tables, are not usable by folks in wheelchairs. How do you get down to the street level? So we need to do a much better job of ensuring that the benefits of this work are spread across all the folks that live in our society. At the same time, I feel like there's some muscle memory that's being learned here, right? So this is going back to Miami Beach. is a project that was stuck for years. We did one of my first projects after we left our previous businesses. When we started our business, one of the first projects we had was the bicycle pedestrian master plan for Miami Beach. That was in the early 2010s. And this was one of the first projects that they tried to get off the ground. And here you see it was implemented in March of last year, in April of last year, because all of the normal red tape and bureaucratic processes completely broke down, and they needed to get stuff done right away. So the fact that they were able to do that, I think, is a huge win. Now the question is, and this is obviously, I think, it's a different quality of material. This is more professional infrastructure than the first example I showed on Miami Beach, where it was really like just moving out cars and putting down a lane of sort of ramshackle outdoor dining. This is the next step above that. And they did them concurrently. This project spent 2 years in permitting, and then during COVID had 1 month of permitting and execution. So can cities continue to really build on and learn from the initial projects that they did to do other work? So the first point was take the projects that you've done and improve upon them. This point is take that learning and apply it to other projects citywide in the way that cities like Paris are doing. That network effect is real, and if you do it properly, you will see the benefits. And this point, I think, is also very important. If you have the cities that have policies set up in place that lend themselves to tactical urbanism or have official policies like this, like the fact that Milan, that Chiara was already working on plazas before COVID, made that so much easier. And so this is an example of the city of Atlanta. In their downtown core, their main street was a 4-lane, basically a highway where all the convention centers and the hotels are. And during COVID in June, this past June, it took about 6 months to plan this project. We took 1 full lane away in either direction and gave that over to pedestrians and made this mega crosswalk. That wouldn't have been possible without the previous work that had been done on the tactical urbanism guide. So to the extent that you can create standards to speak to engineers or create the standards with the engineers, that's one of the beauties of this document. I mean, I have a photo with the city engineer, the city of Atlanta, actually painting this crosswalk, which I think is the goal. That's what we want, for people to realize that this is easy and addresses fundamental safety issues when it comes to our cities. And finally, and I think this gets at some of the comments that have already been made, there is and continues to be an increase in the scale and durability and the types of projects. So we are right now working on a huge project in Culver City, California, which is the studio town, right? This Culver City is where all the major studios are in Los Angeles. Amazon has their headquarters there. Amazon Studios, I should say, HBO, Google has a huge building here. And this is going to go from a 4-lane road for cars to 2 lanes of cars and a dedicated bus lane and a dedicated bike lane. So that shift in pre-pandemic times would have been unthinkable, I think. And this is a project that started barely a year ago. They're going to get, and it's under construction right now. So I see this as being the next major movement to address the photo I showed earlier of everybody crowded together in the bus lane. Like, let's actually address transport for our workers and everybody who actually wants to use transportation, and give them a dedicated lane. We need to start to reallocate this public space for other more efficient uses. And finally, I'll just say that the work that we're doing right now with Bloomberg, I think we're working with them, and we're a technical consultant on their asphalt art projects. And we're looking at precisely the questions that were asked earlier about safety, paint types, and at the very least, we want to show that this paint and this approach does not hurt pedestrian safety, and at the best, it does help because it slows cars down and it makes them more aware of those moments where folks cross. We are very aware that that the visually impaired struggle with these projects, and we are also thinking about that. You can see here that the crosswalk does go through, and I think that's part of the development of this practice, and we're going to continue to work on it. love to hear some of the comments and see the chat. I haven't kept up with it, so
thank you so
guys.
much, Tony, and to all our presenters. We have about 4 minutes left before we have to wrap up today. So what we're going to do is our team is going to capture all the questions and all the comments, and we'll connect you to those that ask the questions and let the chats. And some of them are more technical around speed limits, and some of them are more broad around BRT and why BRT infrastructure can be so hostile. So we'll make sure all the questions get to all the speakers and panelists. But another way to engage is, of course, we provided you with the social media accounts of Urban Think Tank, Street Plans Collaborative, Critical Mass Kampala have an amazing Instagram. You can follow UTT on Instagram as well. So we will make sure that everyone who's commented or left a comment continues to engage. I think we have time for half a question. So our colleague Amy, who's not in Cape Town, she's in Johannesburg. Amy, you have a burning question. We have 3 minutes, so if you could ask a question quickly, we'll try and get a response before our wrap up at 4:45. Thanks, Amy.
Okay. Thank you all for such good presentations, very informative and interesting. My question is for Teddy. I was just wondering, can you speak a bit more about what ways and what initiatives have been put in place to ensure that cyclers are safe when dedicated cycle lanes and other cycling infrastructure are not immediately available? In a lot of African countries, cycle lanes are either not non-existent, or where they are existent, they're not extensive enough. And so what other ways can we make people feel comfortable and safe to encourage cycling in the short term?
Thank you, Amy. I don't know if I should answer that now at Rashik. Should I answer that now?
Go for it. You have exactly 70 seconds. I know it's a tough question, but go for it.
Okay, so we have some projects running where we want to have bike stands and also construct bike spaces where people can easily access and use the roads. Also, we want to encourage, we have a project running, it's called bike sharing, where we want to have different bike stations at different places, at apartments, at schools, at universities, such that someone can easily access a bike and also drop it off in the next bike station. So for now, that is what is running, and we are partnering with a few people to see how we can come up with that and also put it in place. So we want to basically target school students, we target university students or college students. We also want to target the people who are the middle class people, the people who are working. So the middle-aged people, sorry. So they can be able to access bicycles wherever they are. We want to put multiple around the city and multiple around the country as well. So that is a project that is running right now. We want to make it an online project where someone can easily just log in and log out, log in and log out. So for now, that is where we are, but we advocate for more solutions. We are open to more ideas and also open to future partnerships. Yes. I hope I've been clear on that, Amy.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you once again to our panelists. We will stay in touch with you, hopefully continuing throughout the rest of the year and beyond. And thanks for your profound messages. I think it gives us, particularly in the South African context, sort of the energy we need, and the sort of brings out the excitement to keep pushing and to keep advocating. For all those who've commented in the chats, we've seen your comments around political will. We've seen your comments around issues of cycle lanes. We've captured all of them. The abandoned cycle lanes, which were once delivered. We've seen comments around the need for landscape architecture as well. But I think, as Tony said, there's so much more work to do around universal accessibility, around technical projects having different layers of benefits to different groups, and in continuing to improve that design, working with the different designs, working with different groups, safety around walking and cycling in Uganda. So thank you, everyone. In about 35 seconds, we'll start our roundup of the entire day and some of the key points which came to mind. So please do stay. We'll take a very quick break, and then we'll have a roundup of the rest of the day. Thank you, Tony, Teddy, Alfredo, Ben, for joining us, as well as Carolyn and Chiara. And we will connect with all of you frequently from now onwards. So please look out for future requests around workshops and discussions, and we'll hopefully give each project a longer time period to share some of their learnings and lessons, which we can impart in South Africa and in different African contexts as well. And thanks to all the attendees as well. We'll be back on this link in 20 seconds. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for bearing with us. So we're going to go through some of the highlights and ideas that really stood out to us today. There were 4 sessions today, and there are 4 more tomorrow, but I'll start with the session 5, which was the morning session, and then I will pull in some of our team to also share some of their highlights and some of the main points which came to mind as well. So I'll start with session this morning, which we were lucky to have Monica from the Department of Human Settlements, as well as Monique Kona of Zatari, who worked in planning. And I think what really came through with Monica's presentation was the fact that our global urban expansion, when we talk about urbanization and 900 million people moving into African cities, she reminded us that 40% of that will be in the informal settlement context. And so at least half of our focus on how we urbanize sustainably and what we actually do to create more resilient and sustainable communities will need to focus on the quality of life in the informal context. And we'll need to do more work in understanding the actual human experiences of people and not try to impose what works elsewhere into every single community. Monique Kranner from Zatari shared how through the Future City South Africa project they were working on in Soweto in particular, how community engagement took on a completely new life. Even during most periods of COVID, they continued to engage and speak to people, even while many were losing their jobs or had big cuts in their salaries. And then one of the big lessons, and there really were many, is that trust building and sharing and really persisting with the trust building was a big part of that process. So for example, there were some days they simply allowed people to for the entire workshop, share their grievances. And so in everything that they're doing in Soweto in terms of developing a framework for the development of certain parts, trust building was really key. In the decarbonizing cities session, which was excellently moderated, we heard that there's this idea that South African cities are not really ready or doing enough, but in fact, good policy documents and frameworks do actually exist for decarbonization, even though implementation is quite slow and challenging in terms of financial resources, in terms of human resources, that in fact the there is quite a bit happening in terms of decarbonization and climate action in South Africa and across African cities. And African cities are really poised to adopt effective decarbonization strategies. And it's not just that cities are hopping on some bandwagon towards the next United Nations COP conference, which I believe is about to take place or is currently taking place. In the affordable housing session, we heard from the Green Building Council a lot around the fact that green technology and its incorporation into buildings need not be expensive. And there are examples now of affordable housing projects which are moving towards net zero, in particular the Belhar social housing project in Cape Town. We heard from the Jewel City project, as well as from National, which is the National Social Housing Organization, sharing their particular perspectives on the benefits of affordable housing, making cities more sustainable, and sustainable being lowering the cost for local government to operate cities, the impacts on their budgets, the impacts on carbon emissions, and the cost of providing infrastructure to a sprawling city. In particular, the speaker, Carl, noted that there were barriers to scaling up affordable rental, particularly when you go to high density. So when you're moving from 3 to 4 to 5, 6, 7, 8 floors in inner city Johannesburg, there are big issues around historic, I suppose, poor levels of service delivery. And then in addition to that, there's a lot of bulk infrastructure in terms of utilities and services where the capacity in these inner city areas needs to be ramped up quite quickly if large scale affordable housing delivery is going to be a big part of our sustainability push. And then moving towards our final session, which was, as we said, really just an exhibition of inspiration from around the world, South Africa, Africa, and beyond, around why or why not tactical urbanism has been a part or has not been a part of the COVID and post-COVID recovery. And Chiara De Grandi really put it quite succinctly that tactical urbanism is not about saving the world or changing everything, but in certain places, changing these places from being purely for cars to being for people can change the minds of everyone around how spaces and streets are being used. And of course, with open streets in Cape Town, we've seen how in a very short period of time, a lot of the victories have been around shifts in perspective. And hopefully with the new leadership, with our local elections and changes across the country, we'll see a new era in tactical urbanism being part of the agenda for cities. We've seen that this tactical urbanism need not be expensive and cost millions of rands or millions of euros. Street furniture and greenery are key. We also heard that the tactical urbanism approaches and placemaking approaches have a real health impact. I think that really matters in South Africa, where there are certain zones of high sort of traffic accidents, and pedestrians and commuters are always at risk all the time, even in very busy transport nodes where public transport is the primary mover. And then, of course, from Carolyn Daher sharing that there are several health benefits to tactical urbanism and placemaking, not simply seeing it as a beautification exercise. And there are several studies and toolkits now which assist cities and metros in advocating for the health benefits and starting with these projects. There were some stats around 90% of public space being dedicated to the car, and communities across parts of Milan really asking for safer spaces for children, especially when everyone is at home or near their home. And they received 65 proposals for new public spaces in less than 2 months. And the pandemic, COVID provided that platform to reduce that sort of heavy attention given to cars, and provided a moment where there was less resistance to change. And of course, Milan started its journey well before the pandemic and met most of its, went sort of well beyond its targets initially around the number of cycle lanes and the length of various cycle lanes. We also heard that we need to make sure that, I suppose, we think about green space in different ways in green routes and promote both of these and actually start to measure the access that people have to these spaces. We also heard from Urban Think Tank as well around sort of public spaces which are not necessarily too permanent, that could be shaped by the community and that could succeed or fail or be modified afterwards, and not being seen as being purely permanent and unchangeable. Lots of advice and lessons from Tony Garcia that city governments really focus on these big budget silver bullet projects, but they're not going to solve all our problems. And I think we've seen in South Africa the push for BRT, while it is positive push, that there are several other layers that needed to be incorporated into that to make it successful. And so it's not simply about the very expensive projects which fix everything. He also pointed to the low public trust in different cultures and different contexts, and the need to approach projects with humility, but also reminded us that if there is no new normal, we should define this new normal and to move from purely a response to crisis, but decide on the sort of future that we want. I'll open up to check if there's anybody from our team who wants to share any points which resonated from today, perhaps Yasmin.
Hi. I have 2 points that I'd like to bring up. I think from session 6, the race to decarbonize cities, it's also mirroring what Rashik said, that the rate of urbanization in African cities it far outstrips the rate across cities of the global north, and that's due to our circumstances. But at the same time, our global electric consumption of energy is also much lower. So we have an opportunity to work towards a more sustainable energy consumption. I think that is the point that I found quite interesting, and we have everything within our reach. It's just about taking the steps, and those steps can be also small. It's about starting somewhere and also integrating different layers within urban governance to achieve that goal. And I also really enjoyed the affordable housing session, especially the inputs from Catherine Cox, exploring the ideas of, sorry, my video is off, didn't realize. It's not working. Exploring the ideas of backyard dwelling and the potential it has for densifying our cities. Sorry, I didn't realize my video was off. Hi. So that for me is a big influence in South African cities, because informality, it's just it's an aspect that people are not really comfortable with, but it's a very nuanced type of concept, especially when you talk about informal housing. People have different perceptions of what it is. So supporting backyard rentals, especially through microfinancing, that for me, I found inspiring. Those are the 2 points for me. I don't know if anybody else from our team has anything to say.
Checking Amy or Stephen, any big highlights from the sessions today that we might have missed? I know there were many.
Hi. So basically what stood out for me was the Empower Shack. and the sort of materiality that they implemented with regards to the community. I saw that they mainly used timber, and then they used concrete with regards to their firewalls, which I wanted to ask Alfredo this question, especially because it related to decarbonizing cities. In terms of policies, I've noticed that they used concrete walls for firewalls, but there also could be, more sustainable materials that you could use that could, perform the same thing, which also ties into the decarbonization, because there is a link between the two. If we could just challenge the policies and make sure that there is sufficient information to challenge city officials that there are materials such as sandbags that could perform the same sort of fire resistance to concrete walls or even hempcrete, maybe then we could also reduce the carbon emissions just on how policies are brought based off what market would show that level of indication. So that's what I really found very, very interesting about that. Was my
Thanks so much, Stephen. I think that's a good way to wrap it up, because we had not planned it this way, but from session 1, which was on community engagement, and turning our attention back to informality, which is not necessarily our experience every day, but really for the majority it is, linking that to decarbonizing not being this sort of only this big investment push to rely on wind turbines and solar panels, and then moving towards affordable housing being a green tool to decarbonize. Every transport trip that does not require someone to travel 45 kilometers by a car which emits, or vehicle which emits greenhouse emissions, and then again linking it to the health benefits of tactical urbanism. So we, in a good way, have had these links throughout the day that are how we live, where we live, how we enjoy ourselves, how we recover in terms of going out into spaces again, how we keep our streets and public spaces safe, and how we finance our greener, more inclusive developments. It just reminds us of how it is all interlinked. For those who are still here, and if you could please remind, I think our team will be pasting tomorrow's sessions in the Zoom chat. But tomorrow we start with session 9, which focuses on transport. We have Ms. Yulisa Kani from Transnet, who opens our session tomorrow along with the mayor of Buffalo City. And then we have a panel discussion with really interesting academics and practitioners in the transport space, asking, can transport planning in the short, medium, and long term help cities recover, rebuild, and build long-term resilience? We're then also very excited to have a discussion with the CEO of SA Cities Networks, Itola Mbanga, around the state of the city's report. So please tune in for that as well. We will then move into a session on the IUDF seed grant projects. And these are projects, I think about 20 of them around the country, which the IUDF and SA Cities Network have funded at a sort of a micro level, relating to community development projects, from food gardens to public space projects. And we're discussing whether those projects can be scaled up and what it means to scale up community projects for citywide impact. And then Geshi will moderate our session on whether smarter cities can help with recovery and resilience. So in the last, I suppose, decade of crises and pandemics and unrest, when I suppose the moment arose, these ideas of smarter city interventions and tools and technologies and civic tech, did they help cities and city governments to respond and recover, and why or why not? On that panel, we have Simina from Aston, Judy Backhouse, as well as Richard Givers from the Open Cities Lab. And then we conclude the day in hopefully what is another interesting session moderated by Sean Dayton, including Karen Green, Marco Morgan, and Dillian Piri. And we're asking in that session is, what's happened to our creative and cultural sectors and events? And can cities and towns, municipalities use events and culture to recover and rebuild? And how do we bring them back? Whose mandate is it to implement events? And have we lost out in the last few years as really seeing these sectors and industries who've really been hard hit by the pandemic in particular? Could we could there be a business and a social cohesion imperative and a benefit to our cities in seeing these as a key strategic pillar in the recovery and the rebuild process. So thank you everyone. That's a very full day today, and the last day of the conference tomorrow. Just a reminder that today there was an activation in Slovo Park, installing water troughs as part of the ongoing improvement of Slovo Park. And Saturday there's a bicycle bus to Langa, leaving I believe at 9 a.m. from the Cape Town Central Library. And then tomorrow there is a project around involving schools and understanding I suppose the benefits of seeing the port as a space for recycling and for rethinking waste around the Durban port in particular. That is a closed event, but it is possible to watch that on Zoom. And then on Sunday, we have a very short program celebrating World Cities Day. So please join us as we announce the winners of the My City, My Lens poster competition. We reflect on some of the activations during Urban Festival, which took place in 3 different communities, and some of the highlights of this particular conference. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you tomorrow bright and early at 8:30, or if you prefer, for one of the 4 sessions tomorrow. Have a good evening. Thanks.